ADHD and stress, today on Engineering ADHD. Welcome back to Engineering ADHD, the channel where we try to make sense of this crazy thing known as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder through the eyes of somebody employed in an engineering field. ADHD and stress, there's a lot to unpack here. The reason for this video is I've recently gone through some very high-level stressful situations in my life, and I wanted to talk to you about how that has affected me and how I have learned to deal with it and what choices I've made because of it, because there has been some significant changes to how I deal with my ADHD based off of what's going on. Now, a bit of background, we're gonna get very real in this video apparently. We have the COVID thing, obviously that is a stressor for everyone. But pre-COVID, if anybody can remember back that far, I had a very close family member diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I was not ready for that. And that started a rather weird spiral that COVID just played into. Now, on top of that, for my family, I'm the sole breadwinner. My wife is writing a book. Obviously this was a decision we both made. I believe in her, I support her, but at the same time, when you are the sole breadwinner for a family, it can add a little bit of stress to your life. And all of those coupled together, plus the normal stress of worrying about the ADHD, trying to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do and being where I need to be, well, it takes a toll. It really does, and it takes a bigger toll on a neuroatypical brain like ours than it does on a neurotypical. Actually, I'm not going to say bigger. It takes a different toll on a neuroatypical brain like ours than it does on a neurotypical brain. So, let's dive in, and first thing we'll explore is the path that brought me to making this video and the stressors that have happened over time. Now, obviously with the stage 4 cancer diagnosis, that was a massive, massive blow right off the bat. At that point, the anxiety and the depression that go hand in hand with ADHD flared up. My brain went to a very dark place. And I tried to pull myself out of it using the cognitive behavioral therapies, diving into the things that I'm passionate about, understanding my stressors, understanding my triggers, but I wasn't making the headway that I needed to make. So I made the decision that it was time to go back onto meds to help me deal with the symptoms that were going on, the thoughts that were going through my head, and bring myself back to where I needed to be to function the way I needed to function. I chose this time to try Vyvanse. Vyvanse is kind of an evolution of dextroamphetamine, which originally dextroamphetamine is 4 amphetamines, Vyvanse is only a single amphetamine, but dextroamphetamine is what I have had the most success, I guess is the right word, or best effects from throughout the process of being medicated for ADHD. Now, I know medication is a polarizing topic in our community. Trust me, I get it. It's a very personal decision. We will be doing a video on ADHD and medication and presenting my views and my perspective. By no means does that mean that that's the way it is, but this is how I see it. It is worth noting that pretty much as soon as I started on medication, the dark thoughts disappeared and the anxiety disappeared, and I was able to calm down, and I was able to be very rational and very logical about the situation. I was able to deep dive into the research into the type of cancer this person has. I was able to deep dive and figure out where we're going, how we're going to fight this fight, and realize that yes, I agree with what the doctors are saying, which is obviously the way that it needs to be. We can all function as a team, and we can all fight this fight together. From there, COVID hit, and for some people, COVID has not been a huge issue. Some people who are introverts, this is a normal Tuesday for them. For me, personally, who's a strong extrovert, and apparently a lot of my nature, a lot of my mentality is based off of social interaction, and now I don't have that. So that, on top of the cancer, even the meds started to not really cut through the dark thoughts that were going on. So now I needed to find something that I could see that coming, and I could deal with that. And the way that I've always dealt with the bad side and the dark side of the ADHD symptoms is to find a passion and just dive headfirst into it and almost lose myself in it. And that for me was making. As I said in my I'm Back video, I could hide behind those videos. I could hide behind the projects. I could hide behind the science. I could be just the person explaining something. And that's what I needed at that point. And through that, and through cognitive behavioral therapy and meditation and understanding and deep diving into whatever emotion my brain wanted to have at that point, I found a bit of solace. So that's one of the tips that I have for insanely stressful, prolonged situations. I'm going to talk about the momentary one. The prolonged ones that start to wear you down, that you start to ask yourself questions like, why does this seem to be so easy for everyone else? Right? People turn around and say, all you have to do is try, when really we're trying harder than everybody else. It's just that our brain behaves differently than everybody else's. So effort is not the key. So when you get that run down state, the number one tip I have is find something you're passionate about. If that's reading, dive into novels. If that's playing sports, go play sports. If that's building things like me, build things, right? And just dive into that and be there and hide there for a minute where the quote-unquote wolves at the door are going to have a hard time getting you. So that is how I dealt with the long-term, it's going to be here a while, level of stress that has ramped up in the last year of my life, year or two of my life. A combination of medication, meditation, and diving into a hobby. And that's how I've been able to get back to the point where I actually feel comfortable sitting and talking with you guys and being that open and being that transparent about what my experiences have been, where my failures have been, where my successes have been. And it's very critical for me that level of realism is always here on the channel. Now, momentary stress, on the other hand. This is a double-edged sword. For some people, it is completely paralyzing when stress level of a situation just shoots through the roof randomly, and you freeze and you stop and you just don't react the way that you think you should. Other people, myself included, it focuses. It brings a lot of attention in, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute. Stress can do one of two things to anyone, neurotypical or neuroatypical. It can destroy you or it can ramp you up. With an ADHD person, sometimes the ramp up isn't good because the ADHD can spiral and you're not paying enough attention and you miss details and things go bad. Let me give you an example. For those of you who don't know, I'm CPR, AED, first aid, and trauma certified for medical first response. I have been very much, my first career choice was to be a surgeon, or an ER doctor. Wound up as an engineer, go figure. But I'm very well trained to deal in medical emergencies, and the stress of an immediate situation where I need to act in order to preserve or protect another person's life is one of those situations where the stress is very beneficial. What happens at that point is everything else seems to disappear for me. And it's me and that problem. It's almost like a hyper-focus state. Like it will snap me into that hyper-focus state and will just deal with what's in front of me. There's a toll. If this is the way that it affects you as well, the toll is that by the time you come out of that state, whether that's a hyper-focus state or whether that's a just an intensity level state, it's going to drain you, right? And there's no way around that. It's just going to drain you. For other people, you wind up with the freezing aspect. I remember an old job I worked at, I was part of a crew working nights in a meat factory. So we all wore white lab coats while we were there, and generally those lab coats got covered in blood for obvious reasons. We're working in a meat factory, and we're a bunch of guys working in a factory, so we like to screw around. So it was not uncommon to see people running around the floor of the plant with blood on their lab coats. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, time to go for lunch. One guy apparently, or 2 people were unloading a blender, which was a no-no. Right? Only one person should have ever been unloading that blender. One guy stuck his hand at the bottom, the other guy turned the blender on. So, see guy running around, lab coat covered in blood, don't think anything of it, notice the blood is bright red, and the world slowed down. Alright? I'm going to spare you the gory details. But the world slowing down exposed something to me, and that was that while I was still there and moving and thinking and trying to be one step ahead and take care of this guy, everybody else froze. So, I think it's the other common reaction to intense, immediate, momentary stress is to freeze. Now, if you freeze, my suggestion is simple. Stop and breathe. Right? There is very little in the world that a split-second reaction is going to help at that point. The split second's already over by the time you thought about it. So, stop, breathe, take a second, right? See through whatever is giving you that stress, because there is a path. You just have to find it. Most of the time, and I can think of no situation other than a life-threatening medical situation where an absolute immediate response is required. And even in those situations, a momentary usually isn't going to change the outcome. Right? And that can bring you back and bring you into control of the situation. There's a lot of research out there. There's definitely a lot of indication that ADHD amplifies stress, stress amplifies ADHD, and the two play off each other, and it can become a perfect storm. And that when it happens, and I don't know how aware everybody else is of their mental state. I've been told that I'm extraordinarily self-aware of how my brain is behaving. I think this is because I've been dealing with ADHD forever and trying to understand it forever, so I try to keep tabs on myself. But when I feel that dark thoughts coming, when I feel the depression, when I feel the anxiety, especially over something small, right, I once again get right back to the thing that I've said a dozen times on this channel. Is this me, or is this the ADHD? And that momentary pause and that momentary question can help, right? Because if your reactions are what will cause the situation to spiral if the ADHD and stress are playing off each other in a very negative way. I don't really know how to take the long-term ones and turn them into a positive. Obviously, a lot of them, especially the COVID situation that we have right now, it just has to play out. There's nothing that can be done, right? We just have to deal with the situation as it comes, and the stress isn't going to go away until everything goes, not back to normal, but until we get to the point where most people have a vaccine, most people are safe and healthy, and we can go back out into the world and socialize again. For me, this stress is not going away. But I'm going to deal with it. And the last and final tip I have is going to get this video demonetized. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm in Canada. It's perfectly legal where I am for both recreational and medicinal use. I know several areas in the States it's kind of borderline, I don't know. But I've recently been working with cannabis on top of the Vyvanse, and we're going to do an entire video on ADHD and cannabis that will never ever get monetized. But I find that this a strong sativa primarily. Strong sativa. This one is a 2-to-1 ratio between cannabinoid and THC. I find it gives me, if you take 2 quick puffs, it gives me 20 minutes of relative calm, right, in my mind, and allows me to focus and move forward. So in certain circumstances and in certain countries, this may be an option for you. It's not one that we should ignore. Again, not telling you to break the law. If it's legal in your country, try it. If it isn't legal in your country, don't. So this is a huge topic, and I don't even begin to say that this 10-minute video I can cover a third or half or quarter or hell even a tenth of all the material that is out there on how stress and ADHD interplay. But what I want from you is I want to hear how you deal with stress. I want to know what you feel your triggers are, because like everything else with ADHD, the stress part, knowing your triggers so that you can avoid the situation, use cognitive behavioral therapy to not get stressed in the first place, is probably the best way to deal with it. But yeah, I want to hear everything about ADHD and stress that affects your life in the comments down below. I want to thank you for joining me on Engineering ADHD. I hope you learned something. And remember, there will always be somebody who does not see the unique gifts of your brain. Don't let that person be you.